Cool. I think you're good to go, man.
All right, thanks everybody. Get this thing plugged in. I'm gonna try to be bold and fire this thing up here in a minute. We'll see. It's hooked up to a hotspot. So I'll let that do its thing. Let me see here. All right, I'm going to be presenting the Omni2100 real-time VOC analyzer. That's what that little box is over there. So you can see scale. I'm Jason Robles, president of Camsco. I've got Dr. Nabil Saad from OmniScent here. He might help me out. I might call on him if there's a question that I can't answer about the technologies. Slideshow. Okay, so the topic's going to touch on the MEMS-based micro GC technology. We've started an EPA Method 301 validation test. So we'll let you know how that progress went. The latest unit software and hardware updates, some field applications and some customer scenarios, you know, how customers are using it. And then if you guys have any questions, so feel free to jump in at any time. Don't be afraid of interrupt. So the Omni2100, just a real quick overview, has a very high accuracy. We can get down to about 0.34, below 0.3 ppb. It's autonomous, no operator. So you just saw me set it up. So it does need power, but it's very low power. No carrier gas, uses the ambient air as the carrier gas. 24/7 cloud connectivity. It's remotely managed. I'll pull it up on my phone and start it here in a minute. And it's 10 pounds, so it's fairly small, easy. Controlled via a web-based portal, so everything's done either on your phone or at your desktop. So you can program the sampling times, adjust how many samples. If you want to run 100 samples and 100 cycles in a row, you can do that. You can stop it, start it. Cool thing about being cloud-based too is that if we need to do a code update or update a feature, shoot out a new, function to the instrument, we can do that. Nobody has to go mess with it, so it's pretty nice. Remote diagnostics, so it has multiple temperature and humidity sensors inside of it. All of those things can trigger alerts to shut their instrument down, and we're always improving those based on the different conditions at the sites. Like the gentleman mentioned, every site is different, every scenario is different. So, but it's nice to have that control. The data analytics are running on the sensor node at all times, so you can go back and see, okay, did my flow rate drop and all that fun stuff. So it's very simple user configuration. As far as starting and stopping, setting runs, putting in notifications if I want to be notified if I get a 3 ppb benzene. Shoot me a text or an email. So it's very easy to set up on the front end that way. So depending on the concentrations, you can sample to get that down to that 0.3 ppb. We've got to sample for about 40 minutes. We've got to take the sample onto the instrument, 40 minutes, and then it takes about 15 to 20 minutes. It's actually doing very similar to what the tubes go through. It's desorbing onto a micro GC and then onto detectors. And it's doing that analysis on board inside the instrument, which is a pretty big feat by the OmniScent team and the technology. So if you're in very high concentrations, if you know you're having a problem, you can get it out there and sample for 2 minutes. Greater than or equal to 10, you can go about 10 minutes. So it just depends, but there's always going to be about that 15, 20 minutes of sample processing time that's actually happening on board. So that's a little bit of you can see that it intakes the sample onto the pre-concentrator, and you can see the separation starts once it heats up and the flows put it onto the GC, and it comes off the column. It's the GC. Also during that 15 minutes, it's purging itself to get ready for the next sample run. So that's all happening. The temperature is stabilizing, the data gets processed, uploaded, and if you had a high result and you had a threshold there, it's going to kick you your notification. Tolerance to the environment, you know, with any piece of instrumentation, there's always going to be humidity. Humidity is going to be a big issue for any instrument. This instrument is no different. So we have to do things to mitigate that. So Nafion tubes are used in the sampling flow path to reduce the moisture. You know, they do get regenerated in situ, so that's nice. The micro QC itself has a temperature controlled enclosure, and then there's dust filters on the front end, and they're just particulate matter filters that just plug into the sampling port. And there's two sampling ports. There's actually a calibration port and a sampling port down here. So calibration tank, if you have that question, you plug it in. It'll take about an hour. You know, we'll run 50 ppb of benzene on it, make sure it's matching up, and then the sampling inlet's down there as well. So the Omni2100 proprietary MEMS-based technology is the monolithic chip, and I'll show you a picture of the chip. It's very small and lightweight, obviously. It can be integrated and repeated rapidly. Has very low power and temperature control, and they can be made fairly quickly, the chips. It definitely simplifies the assembly post-fabrication to have chips that come out of that process. And there's definitely a reliable fluidic interconnect between the micro QC components. So, and you'll see a picture. That's the chip. So the pre-concentrator actually has assortment very similar to what's in the assortment tubes. So that's a pre-concentrator. And then the column. And there's two detectors at the very end. So same type concept as TDGCMS. So it's two sorter beds, Carbopack X. So the EPA 325 tubes use Carbopack X and Carbopack B. Those are actually both approved for MEC 325. And then the separation column, and then two complementary detectors, flow rate sensors, and it has 4 temperature sensors, one for the pre-concentrator and one for the serpentine column. So that's the column. So this is a little animation. Let me see if I don't mess this up. How to get it going on here.
He said normally at the bottom of the slide there.
Yeah. Resume slideshow. That's okay. So the sample is going to come in through here. It's going to pass through the detectors, through the column. It's going to come back onto the pre-concentrator. So there's a boots and pump here. It's going to reverse flow once it's done. So you sample for 30 minutes. It's going to reverse flow back through the column, back through the 2 detectors, and that's how it's going to confirm your compound. So there's a little animation back here. So the detectors are very important, and I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about this. So if you have questions, Dr. DeVille is here. It has 2 capacitive detectors, and this is actually, and it has polymers. It's covered with polymers on both the different detectors. One has a thin, and one also has a thick. So captive detector 1 has a thin OB1 coating, and the number 2 has a thick OB1 coating. And depending on how those swell, once the compounds go through, it's how it targets the compounds. Here's a look at the delta C between 1 and 2. So you can see the blues, detector 1, and you can see the spike for benzene. And the way we get the confirmation that it's benzene is from detector 2 on that negative peak. So we're getting that confirmation in the field happening. Bill, do you have anything to add to that?
So normally what it is, it's in chromatography, it's based on retention time, but you have other like cyclohexane shows within the same retention time as benzene. But the only way you can confirm that this is a benzene is when you look at detector 2. Detector 2 gives you a negative signal for benzene, but no signal for cyclohexane. So the ratio for the algorithm, it tells you that this is 100% confirmation that's benzene versus cyclohexane as an example.
Thank you very much. So we had a client, specified monitoring client having one spot, one tube, just giving them fits, just they've been over for a while. So he calls me up, he's like, hey, really interested in that real-time monitor, but it's in I can't get any power, and I need solar power, and I need wind meter. Can you put it on a trailer too, so I can just move it around when I want? So I actually ended up doing it. It's pretty cool. So this is it. So this has been deployed since January. It's intrinsically safe solar power, I should mention. It has the weather station up here. This is just the battery box. There's 2 batteries inside. There's the Omni2100 solar. And since the Omni is such low power, it can run off that solar power just fine. It's ran for months on end, just sitting on that trailer out there. So he's been having an issue, and he's working with EPA right now to subtract the values, the benzene values, because he has a meter. So he wants to subtract his benzene values picked up by the Omni based on when the wind directions. So if he gets a positive hit coming from the north where his neighbor is, he's trying to subtract that out. So that's pretty close to being done. So that's pretty cool. So it has helped him a couple of times on a day-to-day basis. He started getting hits on his Omni, and he called the guys out in the field, the LR guys, workers out there, asked them to look around. They couldn't find him. They went out there and looked with their tools. He went out there and happened to see a vacuum truck about, I think he said about 150 yards downwind, and immediately called them. They didn't have their emission controls on, shut it down, levels went back down. Another time, it helped him pick up from a neighboring facility with an open path. I believe they have an open path on their side. And EPA agreed with him that the values are definitely coming from his neighbor. He was very happy about that. I think he's considered both open path and single point. For him, he's only had a problem with 1 point, and I think he likes to keep the can of worms closed if he can. I mean, why monitor in more locations than you have to if your goal is to reduce your one location? So he hasn't had to move it. So I was a little worried we were gonna have to move it a bunch, or he was gonna have to move it. But we picked a good spot, and it's been sitting there for 6 months now. So the pros, I told him, I want you to give me the good, bad, and the ugly. What's been good, what's been not. So he was nice enough to share. Pros, it's simple, small, simple form factor. You place it in tight places, easy access to the web interface, text forms. He's only interested in benzene. It is good for VTEX, but most of my clients are interested in just benzene. No detection limits for benzene, flexible sampling intervals. He's adjusted. He's had times where he thought things were going to be high, and he's went in and made shorter sampling, trying to get more granularity. The solar power and wind sensor options are available. Sitting that thing right on the Gulf Coast, we've been looking how it's going to hold up, and it's holding up very nicely. I think the trailer is actually his favorite part, but the trailer itself, everything's been running very nicely. We've never lost power to the unit. We've had times with high humidity, but we'll get into that. Cons. So the resilience to operating in extreme environmental conditions is being fine-tuned. It is sensitive to humidity. Humidity at 90 degrees, 95 degrees. It's kicking our butt these last couple of months, to be honest with you. So we've been struggling keeping it on. So right now, we're in the process, OmniSense in the process of creating a completely hermetically sealed box for certain components to keep them away from the salt water, away from the humidity the best we can, so that we can operate continuous. Because that's the goal, is 24/7. So I think the longest it ran without stopping was about 3 months, 40-minute sampling. So they were getting about 1 an hour. But it's very helpful to them when they're only looking at 2-week data for the last 3 years. So limited data charting ability in the portal. So that's something that's being improved all the time. Those are updates that can be shot out. And there's been new reports since I've even submitted this presentation that are available. So that's stuff that can be improved upon, but that's what he cares about. So I want, that's what probably some of you care about. If it completely, gets hit by lightning, something like that, you do have to send it into their factory if you don't have another one. So that, if you don't have a backup, you have to send one in. That's a con. And then multiple alarm groups, you must stop sampling to change alarms. And that's something that's also we've taken into account with the software team, and things are being developed as we speak. So every request, somebody else is going to have that request. So we just try to pick the most important ones and work on those. And maybe is there interrupted alarm? Is that up to date now?
Yeah, it's up and running.
Okay, so that's out of date. Now when the instrument goes off, it'll let you know. We didn't have that. We didn't have that before. So recent software, there's a bunch. Continuous operation mode. I think first we had it set to, it was 100, but now
99 runs. Now it's infinite.
Yeah, now it's infinite. So that's just a recent software update. There's a link to the full weather data page if you have the anemometer as part of it. You can export all the weather data. And these are all things that clients have asked for. So we change the VO threshold alert to include wind speed and wind direction. I think that one's been a very helpful one to our client, just to go see. I had a 10 ppb and the wind was blowing northwest during that time period, and it shows up right next. It's really quick confirmation for him and his patients. The alerts include the VOC concentrations, notification when the cycle is missing weather data. So out there, like on that solar, that trailer, it's all connected to a hotspot and onboard Wi-Fi. So if the weather station loses the connection to that, it'll stop recording the data. The data gets captured by the wind sensor itself and can be recovered, but it'll let you know. And then we want to configure the user interface updates to configure the wind sensors and link to the full meteorological data page. So they're kind of been separate. We want to bring all that into one portal for you. And then we're improving multiple file downloads. So that's also something asking. And also false positive benzene flagging based on detector 1 and 2. Maybe you want to.
Yeah, so this is exactly what I spoke about, that in case you have benzene and cyclohexane, they show up normally on the column retention time very, very close and very hard to tell. So using 2 detectors, one that shows a positive signal, the second one shows a negative signal, and the specific ratio is 100% determination that this is benzene. One thing, since I'm on the topic, actually, it's the data that was collected at this plant was compared with the neighbors who have an open path, and it correlates very well. The funny part is this system is only 1/10 of the price of the open path and delivering the same quality data. And also it's on wheels, so it moves around if you want it.
Yeah, it was nice. We were in Houston. We built the whole thing at Camsco, and then we had to take the big sail solar panels off. Drove it down there, put the solar panels on, and they had a crew come hitch it up, drop it off at the spot, unhook it, and I mean, once you power it on, hopefully I'm not lying, it'll run. So if it connects to the internet. So just a little bit about the EPA Method 301 validation progress. This is very important for us because, as far as our clients go, they're very interested in their passive tube monitoring, and we're seeing that technology as, you can call it whatever you want, but everybody's having to do it, and more. They're having problems in certain locations, and they might not necessarily want to get permits to build, say, an open path. They just want to monitor in a single location. They might want to monitor, one spot for 2 weeks and move it around for another 2 weeks. So this allows you to do that. So 2 Omni units are operating simultaneously with 40-second sampling time. So this is the benchtop study. This was done at the OmniCent factory in California. They're based out of California. And the VOC samples were verified using the 325 tubes. Eurofins actually ran the tube samples and started on formatting. So you can see this is the Omni2100, the unit 24. This is the 29. I got in place with one. And then this is the sampling tube. So there was a very good limit of detection. I think we had to be below 0.34.
And actually, so normally what the requirement from the EPA is, you have to be 1 order of magnitude better than what your action limit is. 9 microgram per cubic meter for benzene translate to 3 ppb. So you have to do, your limit of detection has to be 0.3 ppb or better. And then in both cases, we achieve that.
Yes, so it's a very good test. We're trying to get the units into the field for the field validation is a required part of it. The humidity's been kicking our butt, so we need it to stay on for 2 weeks. So it will shut off if it gets about 90, 95. So we're just trying to find a good window to do that, or have the Omni-2200 ready to go out there and be able to handle the 2 weeks with the high humidity. So ongoing. We talked about it. They provide a limit of detection less than 3 ppb, and then we'll do the field validation study. Some other applications. So we can achieve a 40-second sampling cycle. There's still 15 minutes of processing, but for high concentrations, we can achieve that. So you can probably get about 3-4 data points an hour if you wanted to. Also, since it can be plugged in, OmniCent pioneered an independent vehicle interior air quality test, which is pretty cool. Do you want to?
Yeah, I can speak to that quickly. So normally what we like in the Western world is what we call new car smell. And unfortunately, these are all VOCs. And we are not very sensitive to it, but in the Asian continent, especially in China, in Korea, South Korea, and Japan, there are stringent regulations for that, because it's the same enzyme that breaks down the VOCs, is the same enzyme that breaks down the alcohol. And if you have a friend who drinks and turns red, sometimes it's because of that lack of enzyme. So people in the Asian countries, when they get into a car and has this fresh new smell, normally they feel dizzy and nauseous. And so this is a test. There are regulations, especially Ford has adopted this, and most new car manufacturers, that they have to meet certain regulations, especially for export to big Asian countries that have those regulations. As I mentioned, China has the most stringent, and then followed by Japan and South Korea. So because it can be either powered from a solar panel, or it can be plugged in actually from a 12-volt source in the car. They can use it at car manufacturing sites to measure the VOC emission that comes from the carpet in the car, and then from the seats and from the dashboard, just to make sure that they are in compliance.
Thank you very much. So right now, I'll just show you the interface, and we'll just try to kick up a sample so you can see there's a green dot. Kind of see. But I'm going to go ahead and just start a run, and that thing should fire up. So you see status go, and we're sampling. Now I could just as easily stop it if I want to.
So it has both a Wi-Fi and cellular capabilities built in.
Yes.
And so you don't need anything. You just can have it in the middle of nowhere. And then as long as you have either a cellular or Wi-Fi connection, you can log into it and download the data anywhere in the world, and then be able to tap into this like Jason is done like for you.
Yes. So we'll have it at our booth too, if anybody wants to come. We're in the middle section. And I won't take up any more of your time. You can get to your next presentation early after questions.
What's your booth number?
So I don't know, but they'll find me. We'll be together for a few days. So we're in the middle. We're in the big room. Yes, sir.
Talk about pricing, but you give us the price.
Oh, pricing?
Round.
For the 2200, just for the Omni-2100 unit itself, is about 30 grand. Yes, and then there's yearly maintenance. After it's been out in the field, we'll need it back. Obviously, all instruments need to be calibrated. So depending on if you have it running continuously, we say about once a month. If you have it running continuously, you'll have to go out there and plug a tank into it once a month.
Verification.
For verification, yes, sir, for calibration, verification, make sure it's not drifting. So
What about contamination
contamination.
on the GC?
The GC itself.
The GC columns looks very small, so.
Yeah,
So this, it can run continuously 24/7. Approximately right now, as it stands, the chip itself, everything is integrated. You have the concentrator, you have the HGC column and the detector. The chip might need a replacement within a year time for that purpose when it runs, of course. We have units that's been running for more than 2 years in an intermittent fashion and did not require any degradation, or didn't show any degradation or require any upgrade.
depends on the environment too, to be honest with you. Luckily, the solar unit's in one of the harshest, Corpus Christi, right by the water, so it's pretty close. I mean, so it's been pretty harsh. We went through the freeze okay, that was nice. We don't really have a problem with low temperatures, unless the temperature gets too low, it's below the freezing point of benzene, then we shut the instrument off. It's not pointless to run it. But we made it through the freeze okay, but the humidity's been kicking our butt, I'm gonna be flat out, so we've got to get that fixed, and we're working on that. But I have full confidence that we'll be able to get it done. So, yes, sir.
Yeah. In zero wind scenarios.
Zero wind? Do you know that?
Sorry,
For a zero wind scenario?
And
I mean, it's gonna pick up whatever's coming into that sampling port. And so if you have it right on your tube shelter, that's all you care about. But no, it's just gonna pick up whatever's coming across that super tiny sample.
so it's active sampling in
Yes.
this case. So the pump is pulling as opposed to the tubes that you have tube will depend on some wind current. But it's active sampling, so you're pumping through
It's about
as much, so it's sampling from the surroundings at home.
15 milliliters a minute it's sampling right now. It's probably in the sampling process. I mean, it'll tell you, there's different steps, but right now it's in the backward purge. So it's purging and then it'll start sampling. So, any other questions? Oh, yes.
Calibration.
Yes, that's what, so the cal,
How
probably about once a month. If you're running continuously, once a month right now. So, and
It's verification, not calibration.
for verification, so you have a
One
cal.
point, it's not calibration.
Yes, yes.
So the other question, what about the linearity of the
Right, so
analyzer?
you can do with the benzene canister, you can do the calibration at multiple temperatures. So you'll end up having 3 different fluids. And then you run through it. But so what we call field calibrations and we call chemical calibration, which is various concentrations. So this is basically around 6 months. You can send it back in for a check. And then we can run it at the factory, we run it at various levels from 1 ppb, 5 ppb, and 10 ppb, and then do the thing. We had instruments that have been in the field for approximately a year and a half that came back. And then the fit was still okay. It's not perfect, it's not a 0.99 correlation, but it was still okay. But our recommendation, especially for compliance purposes, is every 6 months you can send the unit back for we can run the whole gamut of the chemical calibration.
That's a nice thing is that you can unplug it, put it in a box and overnight it. So, I mean, it is easy to get back and forth. Yes, sir.
So does your software, so it looks like you can go in and access all the data from some time period. Does the software also do push notifications, like you can set a alarm setting? If there's a hit above X, send an email to some distribution, is that functionality exists?
Yes, and that's user set. So you go in and it's actually, you'll see benzene, you'll pair up to whatever PPB you want, put in the phone number or email or both if you want both. And yes, you'll get that notification if the value is above when it reports automatic. So yes, that's very important. The notifications is very important to everybody, especially my clients, because they want to know right then so they can send guys out and look however they want to look.
And you can have a list of multiple people to go to, not only one person.
Yeah. You can set it yourself for multiple people. Yes, sir.
I'm a bit confused about the detection limit.
Yes.
You started with PPB detection limit, then one, and then when you do the 301 verification, then it said the 0.3. So it's time difference between all of those?
Yes, so it's think about it like an active sampling tube. Are you familiar with that? Or so for super low concentrations, we've got to sample for a longer period of time. When the concentrations are very high, because we need to pick it up on the pre-concentrated.
Yeah, so
Um,
for 301, so what was the sampling?
40 minutes.
40 minutes. So it's a matter of a signal to noise eventually, correct? So you need to collect more sample for 40 minutes on the sorbent before you heat it up and vaporize it on the top of the column to do the separation. So if you're targeting, if you are method 325 compliance, you need to be at 0.3 ppb detection limit so you can, because your action level is 3 ppb of benzene. You can have the sample for 40 minutes. If you are chasing a leak in your factory from a storage tank or anything, you don't have to go down to 40 minutes of,
You don't need to be
the
down.
leak is higher, you are at 10 ppb leak, and then you need to find where the leak is coming from. So you can sample for a shorter period of time.
And our clients, oh, yes.
What about the difference from the other compounds you get going on?
Coalition. The bill you want.
So we talk about cyclohexane, is normally the closest benzene, benzene is C6, and then cyclohexane. That's the most, the closest contaminant that can come in. So there are cases where if you have 1 ppm of cyclohexane and you're looking for 1 ppb of benzene, you'll be completely camouflaged by the cyclohexane. But in most cases, cyclohexane is within the ppb level that shows very close peak. But for the detection, the ratio of detector 1 to detector 2, we can discern and set out which one is a false positive, which one is not, and it gets reported right away in the pool.
And what are the two detector types?
So it's a capacitive detectors for both. And then it depends on the capacitance in the middle changes, depending on what species it's going to. And this is how you have a positive peak for detection 1 and a negative peak for detection 2. We talked about the thickness of the capacitance, the capacitance material that's in the column.
And did you guys say something about the Omni-2100 probably having the higher humidity level?
Yes, sir. And that's coming out in the next 4 to 8 weeks.
It's a completely sealed enclosure with an O-ring and bolted down, so it prevents any. So the most cases that we saw, and that was an eye-opening experience that we saw in Corpus Christi. It's very salty and corrosive environment where just the condensation inside can rust some of the screws and eat up some of the traces even of copper. The point. So when you do all of this, you hermetically seal the whole enclosure. You're preventing water from seeping in and then condensing out.
Yeah, if we are in a climate that's, below 90% humidity, we're totally fine. It runs and runs and runs. We're trying to get that top end of humidity, which I think everybody struggles with that. So, but I feel confident that it's going to be, you know, we were pretty close with sealing this one up. So we're pretty confident that the next one will be able to handle that high humidity. Right now, the instrument's gonna shut down, you're gonna lose data during that time period. So,
And like approximate sampling time for it's like 5 to 10 ppb type of protection.
5 to 10 ppb.
I think that it's somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes with one approximation.
So 10 minutes for a little bit more than 10 ppb. 40 minutes for super low concentrations, and if you have high, it's all relative.
Sure.
So that's the sampling. You need to add the separation and regeneration time base, which is a fixed 20 minutes.
I'll put my contact info up there. Anybody else have any other questions? Dynamic range?
We can go up to 1 ppm from 0.3 ppb.
In that.
Yeah, so but it's an overkill. If you are targeting a 1 ppm, you don't have to waste your time on 4 minute sampling. You can go down to, as we showed, you can do 40 seconds if you are in that high range.
That's
But
like,
the detector can.
that's like sort of 10 to the 4.
Correct.
All right, guys. We'll see you all at the show. Thank you very much. What's that?
4307.
4307, right in the middle. Hey,
Well done.
Hey, nice to
Let's see you.
Yeah. Jesse's back there. Hey, Brian.
Hey, how are you?
How was your,
Oh, it's good.
okay?
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. Yes, sir.
All good?
Good.
Yes, sir. Thank you very
Cool.
much.
Yeah, man.
Okay.